We all remember that first step through the wardrobe. Snow falling on a silent forest, the glowing lamppost, Aslan's deep voice. Narnia left its mark on us. It taught us to believe in magic, loyalty, and sacrifice. But what many don't know is that the story didn't end where the movies left it. After the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, after Caspian, after the Pevensie siblings, there was one last tale to tell, the darkest, the most powerful, and the most forgotten. A story that was never brought to the screen, a tale of deception, destruction, judgment, and redemption. An ending that changes everything you thought you knew about Narnia. Today, at last, I'm going to tell it to you. This is the true ending of Narnia. At the western edge of Narnia, beyond Lantern Waste, there lived a naive donkey named Puzzle, alongside an old, cunning, and manipulative monkey named Shift. One day, a lion's skin washed down from Cauldron Pool. Shift, sly and opportunistic, talked Puzzle into wearing the skin and pretending to be Aslan. Although the donkey hesitated, his lack of confidence and the monkey's relentless pressure made him give in. And so began the greatest deception in Narnia's history. Shift presented Puzzle as the great lion to the Narnians. Using his supposed authority as Aslan's mouthpiece, the monkey ordered the felling of sacred trees and the exploitation of natural resources, selling them to the Calormens, a foreign people devoted to a dark deity named Tash. To convince skeptics, he spread a dangerous lie. Aslan and Tash were actually one and the same, a hybrid god he called Tashlan. The woodland animals, confused and afraid, obeyed. Those who doubted or protested were taken to a stable on the pretext of meeting Tashlan, but they never came out. No one knew what went on inside, only that anyone who stepped through that door vanished. As the deception spread, King Tyrion, the last sovereign of Narnia and a descendant of Caspian X, was resting in a hunting lodge with his loyal friend, the unicorn Jewel. When he heard that Aslan had supposedly returned and ordered them to work with the Calormenes, his heart filled with unease. It didn't sound like the Aslan they knew. The arrival of Runewit, a wise centaur and star reader, confirmed his fears. The heavens foretold disaster, and this so-called Aslan was a lie. Soon after, a dryad appeared before them, pleading for help. The trees were being cut down, and the forest was dying. But before she could explain more, she collapsed lifeless. Her tree had been destroyed. Furious, Tyrion rode with Jewel to Lantern Waste, where he witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Two Calormenes whipping a talking horse forced to drag a log. In a blind rage, Tyrion killed them. But guilt consumed him. Had he acted justly or out of rage? Unable to bear the doubt, he turned himself in, ready to face this so-called Aslan. Instead of the lion, he found Shift, dressed in ridiculous, gaudy finery. Surrounded by terrified squirrels and other subjugated animals, the monkey spoke in Aslan's name to justify abuse, slavery, and violence. Horrified, Tyrion called him a liar. As punishment, he was tied to a tree to spend the night. That night, as fire burned on the hill and the false figure of Aslan loomed in the shadows, Tyrion cried out for help. He didn't ask to be saved himself. He begged for salvation for Narnia, and his plea was heard. At dawn, still tied to the tree, Tyrion saw the impossible. Emerging from the air and light of another world, two figures appeared among the trees, Jill Pole and Eustace Scrub, the same two who had once saved Prince Rilian. They had been pulled in by some invisible force, as if reality itself needed them. They quickly freed the king. Together, they headed to an old, forgotten tower in the north, where they found weapons, armor, and supplies. Jill proved her cleverness in the forest, silently guiding the group to the edge of Stable Hill. There, amid all the deception, the unicorn Jewel was still imprisoned. During the rescue mission, Jill vanished for a few minutes. When she returned, she had Puzzle with her, the donkey disguised as Aslan. The moment Tyrion saw his face, he almost killed him. but Jill stopped him. Puzzle, deeply ashamed, confessed he'd been manipulated, and his remorse was real. Tyrion forgave him. With Puzzle free, the group decided to use him to expose the lie. Soon after, they ran into a group of dwarfs and Calormenes marching Narnian creatures toward the stable. The Calormenes claimed they were all being sent south to work in the Tisrock's mines. Disguised as a Calormene, Tyrion stepped up and told them the truth. He showed them Puzzle, exposed the false Aslan, and killed the enemy soldiers. But the dwarfs' reaction wasn't what he'd hoped for. They didn't believe in anyone anymore. Not Shift, not Tyrion, not even Aslan. They were sick of lies, wars, and being used. They declared their independence. Dwarfs for dwarfs, they said, refusing to fight for Narnia. Only one, Pagan, chose to stay. With him, the group returned to the tower. There, they got the worst news from Farsight the Eagle. Caer Paravel had fallen. Runewit and the loyal army had been slaughtered. Narnia, as they knew it, was lost. There was only one choice left: go back to Stable Hill and face evil with what little strength they had left. Night fell over Stable Hill as Tyrion and his allies arrived. There, Shift and Rishta Tarkan were still manipulating the Narnians, luring them into the stable with promises of seeing Tashlan. But once inside, many never returned. Some came out changed, afraid. Others just vanished. Aslan's followers were exhausted, outnumbered, and losing faith. The dwarves, who could have turned the tide, stayed on the sidelines, shooting arrows at both sides. The resistance was fragile, but courage remained. Then the final battle began. Tyrion, Jill, Eustace, Jewel, Pagan, and the last loyal Narnians charged at the Calormenes. They fought with the fury of those who knew they wouldn't survive. As chaos consumed the battlefield, the Calormenes, desperate to appease the wrath of the god they had invoked, started tossing enemies and even their own allies into the stable as sacrifices. In the heat of the fighting, Jill and Eustace were thrown inside. Tyrion realized he would share their fate. Before they could grab him, he lunged at Rishta, and they tumbled through the doorway together. But what he found on the other side wasn't death. There, in a vast green land, Tash awaited, monstrous and silent. The Calormene god seized Rishta, ready to devour him. Tyrion, alone and with no escape, prepared to die. But then a powerful voice commanded Tash to depart. It was Peter Pevensie, the High King of Narnia. Beside him stood Lucy, Edmund, Jill, Eustace, Diggory, and Polly. All of them, the great friends of Narnia, were there, gathered on the other side of the stable door, in a place that looked like Narnia but wasn't Narnia. Only Susan was missing. She had turned away from faith and no longer believed in Narnia. To her, it was all just a childish game. Inside, the stable was vast, beautiful, impossible. A paradise. But for those who didn't believe, it was nothing but a dark, cramped shed. The dwarfs sat in a circle, convinced they were in darkness, unable to see the flowers, meadows, and light all around them. Not even Aslan could open their eyes, because their prison was inside them. Their fear of being deceived kept them locked away. Aslan appeared majestic, and with a single command awakened Father Time himself, a forgotten giant who stood up with a horn in his hand. He blew it, and the world began to die. The sound of Father Time's horn marked the beginning of the end. Stars fell from the sky like fire. Each star in Narnia was alive, and they fell in silence, leaving the sky empty. The moon was swallowed by the sun, and the sun, a dying red sphere, was crushed like fruit in the giant's hands. The sea rose in rage and swallowed the land. Dragons, salamanders, and ancient beasts awoke, devouring everything in their path until they, too, aged, died, and crumbled to bone. Mountains collapsed, cities vanished, and when everything turned to ice, Peter sealed the door with a golden key. Narnia was no more, but it wasn't the end. Aslan led the faithful through that door into a higher, deeper, more real country. With every step, they drew closer to the real Narnia. Not a copy, but the original. What had existed before was only a shadow, an imperfect reflection. And there they all were. Fauns, centaurs, talking animals, old friends, even those who had died centuries ago. They embraced, they laughed, they ran free under an endless sky. Emeth, a young Calormene who had served Tash in good faith, was welcomed by Aslan. Even though his devotion was to a false god, his heart still sought the truth. And Aslan, who sees beyond names and into the soul, welcomed him into his kingdom. In that new world, there was no pain or death. Lucy, Edmund, Peter, Diggory, Polly, Eustace, Jill, and Tyrion were all there. All except Susan. She had turned her back on Narnia completely. She remained in the real world, alive, but distant. She no longer believed. Then Aslan revealed the truth. They had all died in a train accident in the human world. But it wasn't something to grieve. For them, the true story was only just beginning. Now, at last, you are beginning Chapter 1 of the great story, Aslan told them. A story no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, where every chapter is better than the last. And so, in a land without end, the true friends of Narnia went further up and further in, toward an eternity that would never be written, but would always be lived. Let me know in the comments which other unfinished movie or saga you'd like to see the ending of. And if you enjoy this kind of content, the best way to support us is by leaving a like and subscribing. See you in the next video.